Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior Design Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Wednesday morning, afternoon, or evening. I was just mentioning in the chat, I woke up with a terrible headache today, so I'm going to take it a little bit slower. I do have water with me. Thankfully, I don't get them very often, so it is what it is. That's life, right? But a big hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone joining me live in the chat today on Behance. We're going to dive straight into things, and we're going to be tackling today using Photoshop along with Adobe Firefly. Now, if you have gone ahead and downloaded the starter file, this is what you're going to be seeing. A lot of it probably makes no sense, but it will as we start designing. So we're going to actually start off right up here with a bit of a photo composition. And you can imagine a world where you're working on this new piece and you've grabbed a stock photo from Adobe Stock and you're starting to edit, but you might want to make a few changes. So we're going to start inside of Photoshop and we're going to keep things a little bit simple. Now, first thing we might want to do is we might want to remove the boat, right? Simple stuff for the most part. I'm going to grab either my lasso tool or the object selection tool. Now, the thing with the object selection tool, let me actually just select the right layer. That would help, right? The interesting thing about the object selection tool, potentially, is if I hover over top and drag a selection on top of this boat, what you're going to notice is it selected the boat, right? But it also missed the shadow or the reflection. That's what it is at the bottom. So if I were, let me actually just select a little bit more of this boat here. And I'm going to keep the reflection unselected for now. If I were to keep it as this, and then use Generative Fill, and then Generate, what you're probably going to notice is that it's likely going to replace the boat with another boat, because it's noticing that reflection down at the bottom, right? So in a second or two, or three, see, I don't even know what that is, but it replaced it with almost looks like a sunken boat, which is very strange. But it replaced it because it's still noticing that reflection. So what you'll want to do in situations like this is include the reflection. So with the lasso tool, for example, I'm just going to draw around just like this. And because we're using artboards for this particular starter file, you can make a selection outside, but it won't affect anything. Now, I do want to show you very quickly the difference between, now this may not work because I'm on, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and just rasterize this layer. I am going to, there are a lot of options here, aren't there? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go into fill, and then we're going to select content aware, which is the traditional way of doing something like this. But what you're going to notice is that it's not the greatest result, right? Content aware doesn't understand the photo very well. So it's kind of grabbing textures and lighting and bits and pieces from the photo, and it's trying to piece something together with what should be there. But again, it doesn't understand the photo. But now Generative Fill, and I'm in the Photoshop beta, by the way, so Generative Fill has been updated to the new image model. But I'm going to press Generate. It's going to start the process, and it's going to understand the photo a lot better than Content-Aware Fill. So we're going to have a result, actually we're going to have three results, that are a lot more cohesive to what we're looking for, right? The shadow, shadows, reflections, whatever. The reflections are much better. They make more sense, right? This one almost looks like it probably belongs up there. This one's a little bit off, but the nice thing is you get three different results that you can choose from. So we've gone ahead and removed the boat, which is great. But now we might want to add something in. Maybe in your mind, you might want like a mound of dirt and then a plant, maybe a pink plant or something like that, right? Now, you could go ahead and switch over to your browser, go to Adobe Stock, and search for something like a mound of dirt with a pink plant. Are you going to find it? Possibly not. You can find a lot on Adobe Stock, but you might not find that particular element. So what I want to show you is how we can generate something like that, something that you can't find anywhere else using Adobe Stock, or using Adobe Firefly. So what I'm going to do is on the Firefly website, firefly.adobe.com, I'm going to start off with something simple like a mound of dirt with a pink plant. And let's just start with that, and we're going to generate. Now, what we're likely going to notice is we're going to get either a photo or an art piece that is a mound of dirt with a pink plant, but lots of other things around it. This one looks great. It's got a background, it's got the plant. It looks pretty good. This one's probably more what we're looking for, but what we can definitely do is to kind of help us with our photo compositions is just add at the bottom, isolated on a white background. And you can change the background depending on if you want extra contrast or if the background of your photo composition is darker, you might want a black background, something like that. But we're going to generate this again, and we're going to get something that looks like this. And that's kind of what we're looking for in this particular case. Now, one thing you can also do that I would recommend is experiment with the aspect ratios. If you're doing a photo composition that's wider, I would suggest using landscape or widescreen, right? That way you have a little bit more room for your object. In this case, it's that mound of dirt with a pink plant. And it could be anything. It could be a lion, could be a who knows what, right? And now we have, obviously it changed the subject, right? Now it's trying to squeeze everything into a wider aspect ratio, right? So you're going to definitely see a difference in the subject as you change the aspect ratio. So if I go, let's say portrait, it's going to have less room for the dirt because it's squishier on this side, but it's going to have more room for the plant. So we might actually see a longer plant. So definitely experiment with things like that, right? Not too bad. That'll work, I think. Or let's actually go back. Let's just grab this one here. What I can do now is I can either download it directly to my computer, or I can click on the share icon here. I can copy a link to the image. I can copy the image to my clipboard, which I'm going to do, or you can also save it to your Creative Cloud library so it syncs with Photoshop and Illustrator and Premiere and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to copy it to my clipboard, hop back over to Photoshop, and I'm going to paste. Now it's quite large, so I'm going to make it smaller. And I might want to position it somewhere here. Now, obviously we need to make some changes, right? We have to remove the background. Now we do have, thankfully, the remove background button on the contextual taskbar at the bottom. We can do that to give us a nice head start, but you're noticing that it's not perfect, right? We have some white areas down here. The edges are a little bit rough in some places. So there are a few things we can do. It did add a layer mask for us, so we can click on the layer mask over here to the right-hand side, and we can go ahead and jump into select and mask. Now you can also do this beforehand. So if you wanted to, let's say I wanted to grab my object selection tool, do something like this, right? And then we can dive into select and mask as well. So either way, you can do it. Lots of different ways to select things in Photoshop. Now, we have a lot of different options on the right. Don't get too intimidated. You're really probably going to only use a few of them. Radius, I'm not going to touch too much. Maybe I'll increase a little bit. That's really good if you're working with hair or fur. It's going to really start detecting some of that stuff. Shift edge I use all the time, right down here. So if you do have a bit of a border or a halo around your object, just bringing that in. Aha, much better, right? And then you might want to increase the contrast a touch. And then if you are working with like a subject on a green screen, for example, you can decontaminate color. Now here, it's probably not going to help too much. It helped a little bit, right? It kind of got rid of some of that white halo around it. But if you're, if you have some light spill or some color spill, decontaminate colors is pretty good. All right. He can slide. He has a headache. Hopefully I didn't make a significant shrinkage. What is going on in the chat? No smart. Yeah, I rasterized the smart object. I have sinned. I'm gonna have to go to a confession box or something. All right, so I'm gonna output this with a layer mask and press OK. And it looks fine, right? It looks fine. There's obviously a lot we have to do with it, but what I want to show you now is how to start incorporating something like this and blending it with your image. Now, one thing we can do is we can start using one of our neural filters. So I'm going to save myself now. I am going to convert this into a smart object, right? And now if I go up to the filter menu, go down to neural filters, I can use something like the Harmonization neural filter, which is going to look at a selected layer. In this case, it's the background, and it's going to try to match the colors. And of course, you can customize and tweak over here to the right? You can increase or decrease the strength, but it really tries to harmonize your foreground subject and your background subject. All right, next thing I want to do, I want to blend this, maybe add a reflection. How do we do that? Lots of different ways, but I want to show you how to use generative fill to do exactly that. I'm going to grab my lasso tool, shortcut key L, and I'm going to just, make a selection. Something like this, right? Something like this, very basic selection. Just like that. So I'm including a little bit of the edge of this mound of dirt, and then I want to include the water at the bottom. Now, if we hop into generative fill, we can type something out, but let's just hit generate and see what happens. Now, what I'm hoping happens is that it recognizes that it's inside of water or on top of water, and it adds a reflection to its best of its ability of the mound of dirt. And maybe in the flowers, who knows, right? That's not, ooh. Now we're talking, right? It tried to add the flowers, different color, but of course we can go back and add color. This one is decent. I don't know what this is. Oh, actually, you know what? This might be trying to add the flowers there. That looks like pink. Not bad, Photoshop, not bad. Now in this case, I might want to just select this and maybe just redo that. But just with that one selection and one generative fill, we now have an object that's blending much better with our photo, right? Which is impressive, most impressive, General Kenobi says. Lisa says, "Oh my God, that's really AI." See, this is the AI that I like, right? Text to image is fun, but including generative fill and these AI tools inside of your existing workflows, this just took photo compositions to whole new levels. It's wonderful, right? It's pretty cool stuff. All right, so obviously there's a lot we can do with this particular, and maybe we'll come back to it if we have some time, but we may not, right? I do want to show you a few fun things we can do with Photoshop or Illustrator and Firefly. So over here we have a letter, right? And in this case, I just typed out the letter P. My last name starts with P. Using the typeface Ducky, very fun typeface. If you don't have any fancy typefaces, definitely head over to Adobe Fonts. It's included with many of your subscriptions. You can browse different fonts, and let's say I want to, my internet's cooperating, do something a little bit funky, right? And then I had this from our last stream, I think, but I might want to type out something like just like coffee, right? Which I need probably more of, although I need some water because of the headache thing. But coffee, I drink too much of it. Right? You got a lot of different fun typefaces. This one is pretty cool. You can sync them directly to your Creative Cloud account. They'll come over in Photoshop. But you can just go ahead and type a letter here. And, or you can type you can type a whole word, right? We've got coffee. Now, these are all separate letters. And just very simply, I'm going to show you how to do that. Grab your type tool, shortcut KT, type out a letter. What did I just do? Oh, there we go. You can make it bigger. Maybe we can rotate a little bit, something like that, and just move it around. Now, the reason that these particular artboards are structured the way they are is because inside of Firefly, when we head over there are 4 different aspect ratios: square, portrait, landscape, and wide angle. Wide angle, yes, which is basically 16 by 9. And for this one, I made these artboards to be portrait. So an aspect ratio of 3 by 4. In this case, I think it's 1200 by 1600, if I'm not mistaken. So just definitely keep that in mind if you are working with these, cross-application workflows, that the aspect ratios are fixed on Firefly. So what you would do once you've started to, build out these images, right, with these texts, you would just save them to your computer. And if I hop over to Finder, I have them right here. There's the letter P, and there's coffee. Now, what do we do with these? Some of you may have seen some clips on Instagram or TikTok of what you can do with them, but I want to show you. If I hop over to Safari again, and inside of Firefly, let's go back to the home page. I'm going to start typing out the letter P. I'm going to put the letter P in quotes so it knows that it wants to focus on that. And maybe, let's say, made of pink fur on a light background. There we go, right? So we started the process of generating the letter P made of pink fur on a light background. Now we're probably going to get something that looks basically like what we typed out, right? And that looks great, but it doesn't really look like the letter that we want it to look like. So we're going to make a few changes. First, change the aspect ratio. We want portrait, 3:4. We're going to do that. Now it's not going to automatically update because we have to regenerate, but I want to make sure we have set to photo. Visual intensity, I'm not too concerned about. I do want to add on the hyper realistic effect just because I find it adds a little bit more crispiness and fidelity to some of these photos, right? But the main thing I want to focus on is right up here underneath, actually it's right up here, underneath content type. It's structure. And this is going to allow us to upload a photo of our subject. In this case, it is simply the letter P in the typeface that we wanted, right? So I'm going to just drag this, boop, pop it in there. It's going to make sure that you have the rights to use this, which is wonderful. And we want to increase the strength all the way to the right. Now, if we kept it in the middle or all the way to the left, it's going to give Firefly a little bit more flexibility in terms of, the structure of this letter P, but we wanted to match it pretty closely. So we're going to keep it at that, and we are going to generate one more time. And if all goes well, we should have a portrait photo of the letter P that we typed out in Photoshop, or you can do that in Illustrator or Adobe Express, made of pink fur on a light background. And there ooh, this one is fancy. Look at that. Now, of course, we can bring this back into Photoshop. Ooh, this one is even better. I like this a lot. This is pretty cool, right? Looks great. But what if you wanted even more control over the style? And that's where down here, the style reference can come into play. Now, I've made videos on how to create materials using Firefly. If you go to youtube.com/learn_@learnfirefly, and maybe Jack will put it in the chat. Oh, wow. It's already in there. Yeah, thank you, Jack. But I've made a video on how to craft materials using Firefly. But what we can do, we can incorporate those into these designs. So if I go over to here, I have a bunch of different materials. Let's try something like, I have a bunch of, by the way, I'm going to be releasing, I have like hundreds of materials that I've generated. I need a life. But maybe we want something like this, right? So I'm going to drag this into the style reference over here. Maybe I'll increase the strength, and we'll keep the letter P made of, and let's try rock and lava on a dark background this time. And we're going to generate again. And what we're going to see is the letter P made of rock and lava, and it's pulling from our style reference, which is wonderful. So it's really going to give us the look that we wanted. Now, you don't necessarily need the style reference. You also don't necessarily need made of rock and lava because it's kind of pulling. It just helps a little bit. But you also don't necessarily need the letter P anymore. So you can just put, let's say, rock and lava. By the way, let's take a look at these. Right? It can definitely get us where we're going. But I'm going to remove the letter P and then just put rock and lava on a dark background. And you probably don't even need on a dark background because we've really set up the stage with our structure reference and our style reference. Ooh, right? And now we're getting some pretty interesting results. But what if we wanted to, go back to our letters? Here we go. Have a whole word in there. Now, we could, I'm going to remove this, just to kind of show you how Firefly handles, let's do widescreen text, right? The word coffee made of coffee? Is that going to work? I don't know. Let's find out. On a light background. I get questions all the time. Can Firefly render text? And for the most part, it does a very good job. What we should see is the word coffee, hopefully spelled correctly. And it did, right? For the most part. But it's not in the typeface that we want. it's just not what we want, right? It's very difficult to describe exactly what's kind of floating in our brain. That's really where structure and style reference comes into play. So if I go back for a second, and we are going to grab our coffee text, and of course you can make this widescreen with, coffee on one line, right? A coffee table book about coffee tables. Interesting. Although, I've been thinking about, like, can I create a coffee table book with some of the materials or even the weird generations that I've made inside of Firefly? Maybe there's a world where we do that. Now, I do think I have, because of course I do, right? I have some materials I've generated with coffee. There's like a latte and there's kind of like a shiny coffee type of thing. Let's see if this works, right? I'm not even gonna write the word coffee. I'm just gonna put made of coffee on a dark background. And this is the fun of Firefly and AI. It's a lot of experimentation. Some things are gonna work. Some things are completely not gonna work. But when they do work, it's magical. Let's see what happens. Ooh, right? I'm liking this. This is fun. I'm going to change this to a light background. And of course, you don't have to make this made of, let's say, a latte. Now, this kind of, here's the interesting thing, right? If you were to put made of latte or made of like stone or something, and then in the style reference, you have a material of coffee, they might go against each other a little bit. Sometimes they'll work nicely together. It's kind of fun. Carol says, that's so nice. Susan says, the ease in the coffee to look like coffee cups. Ooh, Susan, that's an interesting idea. I challenge you, part of this challenge, to see if you can figure that out. I don't know. I don't know if we can prompt that. Made of, let's see, made of coffee. I don't know if this is going to work. And maybe this is like future Firefly, but the ease made of coffee cups. If I had to guess, I'm going to say this is probably not going to work, but this is kind of where we're going to explore generative fill in a second. But this is where, our creativity starts to kind of wander. I mean, this isn't terrible. This is not, it's not great in some cases, right? There's like coffee cups inside of coffee cups. But let's actually go back. Let's put made of coffee. Actually, I want to bring back my reference, made of coffee, on a light brown background, just to kind of create this nice cohesive look. All right. Carol says, make it so, Susan. Yeah, and tweet at me, or X at me, or send me I don't know. So these are kind of fun. They're getting there, right? That one's decent. So this one's nice. So let's say you come up with something that looks really nice. There are a few things you can do. You can either bring it into generative fill directly on Firefly, which we're going to do, but I'm also going to copy the image. I want to show you the difference. So I can go ahead and go up to here, edit, generative fill, and then we can go ahead and, brush over top of here. And then brush over top of here. Again, I don't know if this is going to work very well, but in the last 2 minutes, we are going to experiment. The letter E made of coffee cups. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to see. Susan says, we'll do my best. Yeah. And Tim says, maybe just do the E's separately. I mean, honestly, yeah, that's probably your best bet, is to do some areas in different chunks. I mean, it tried, right? Generative Fill tried to do what I wanted it to do. It's hard to explain exactly things like this, but it tried. But if I go over here and maybe paste my image in, we can also try generative fill inside of Photoshop. And maybe we'll do, like Tim mentioned, we'll do one E at a time. Again, it's just a little bit difficult to explain. The letter E as a coffee cup. And there might be like a variation of the prompt that works best, either made of or as a, or whatever it may be, right? We'll see what happens. But anyway, you get the idea, right? So, see, it doesn't really look like an E. That one does, but it doesn't look like a coffee cup. So there's a balance there. But the solution might be, honestly, is when you're at this stage here and you have your letters, you have your COFF, which you want to look like coffee, leave those as is, and then find a way to try to make the E's at this stage look like coffee cups. There are ways of doing it. But this is the challenge and fun of using all this AI technology, is it allows us to kind of expand our creativity in different ways that maybe we didn't really do before, but now we can start doing it. I mean, this one almost worked, right? It has some coffee kind of sprouting out the top. So there might be something there with generative fill that you can kind of finesse into place. But there you go. So that's going to wrap things up for today. We covered a little bit of photo composition using Photoshop and Firefly, generative fill, some text to image stuff, and then we dove into the wonderful world of making fun, strange, weird letters using Firefly and Photoshop. You can also do these letters in Illustrator or Adobe Express as well. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Apologies for me kind of going up. Maybe it's best if I go a little bit slow today, but yeah, this headache is no fun today. But stick around, we've got more content coming up in just a few moments, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.